Hey, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're at. Welcome to today's session with Lytics and Actable on Composable CDP. So I'm here today. My name is Jeff Sechrist. I run product at Lytics, and I'm here today with Craig Shin, the co-founder of Actable. Actable is a digital consultancy that helps companies organize and optimize their first-party data. He's got experience as an early CDP customer and has been helping customers get value from CDPs and solutions, data-driven solutions for a long time. Craig, welcome. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Jeff, and thanks for having me to you and the Lytics team.
Yeah, is there anything else that you'd like to highlight out of your background before we get started?
I mean, I think you've touched on the key things, but I'll say I'm a marketer by training and trade, but very empathetic to the challenges that marketers and then organizations have in using first-party customer data in their campaigns as well as their customer experiences, and looking forward to diving into this topic with you. Thank you.
Great, thanks for being here. All right, well, we're going to spend some time today talking about CDP in general and what the whole sort of notion of a composable CDP is, some of the limitations, and how to really get started in this space. So thinking about how to take it to the next level, how to get started quickly. And, one of the benefits you'll see as we get started here, that we see composable strategies as a way to help you get started quickly and to be able to get quick wins and build off that. So hopefully that theme will come through, and feel free to ask questions along the way. Of course, as participants are all muted automatically, if you want to ask a question, there's a Q&A box. Type your questions in there and we will either address them along the way or save time toward the end for those questions as well. So let's jump in. So today, more than ever, companies are trying to optimize what they can get from first-party data, as there's been, more and more technology and regulatory changes sort of making third-party data and third-party techniques less reliable and less desirable. Companies are trying to find ways to extract as much value from this super valuable asset, first-party customer data. CDPs are designed for this use case. They're designed to connect data, to resolve identity, to build customer profiles, to segment and build audiences, and to activate that data to an ecosystem, which largely started as marketing, but today is much broader than marketing as well. So it's a broad ecosystem of use cases and providers that companies are trying to activate data to. But there's a bunch of challenges that the market continues to see and that continue to evolve that are, demanding companies take a different approach. We at Lytics about 18 months ago started moving down an approach of composability, and the idea there was to move away from a CDP as yet another data silo, and instead as something that leverages the technologies and the data that the company already has in place. And that's my viewpoint on it, and we'll share more along the way. But Craig, why don't you talk to us a little bit about your perspective,
Sure.
Composability, and what customers are coming to you and to Actable looking for?
Thanks, Jeff. And actually, you can leave it on that slide. I'll build up to these thoughts.
Okay.
So first, I'll say, Jeff mentioned it in the intro. I was an early adopter and devotee of the CDP space. I was actually a Lytics client going all the way back to 2014. And at that time, I was using the CDP and Optimizely, and I was personalizing on-site messaging to the customers that I had I worked at an online retailer for outdoor hard goods and apparel. I used the CDP and Facebook to try to acquire better customers. There were segments that that I wanted to build for which I did not have data in my ESP. So I would use the CDP to build lists for targeted offers and promotions that we were running. I was hooked on the concept. And in fact, I so believed in the promise of CDP that I left that organization to rejoin the ad tech, MarTech world and came aboard to Lytics, where I worked for 4 years. Now, as much of a believer as I am in the customer data platform space and activating first-party customer data, I can say that implementation for packaged CDPs typically has come with some level of friction. Lytics, the real-time CDP, the decision engine, if I want to use it in real time, I have to pre-envision what segmentation criteria I want. I have to know it to map data in to be able to use it on use cases later. And if I discovered that I have a new, like previously unimagined segment need, I might not be able to use the CDP for that use case. And one jumps to mind where we had this kind of crazy sale where we wanted to look at anyone who bought blue shirts in the last 365 days because we had a collection of blue shirts and we wanted to give that group early access. I hadn't pre-envisioned that use case. So instead I had to go to our customer data warehouse to answer that more complex question of the data. And really we perceived our customer data warehouse as the golden record and the CDP as the activation tool. So this anecdote that I'm sharing is actually from 2014 and 2015. So a lot's happened in the last 8 or 9 years. This is well before GDPR, CCPA, and the patchwork of laws that we have globally. And if we transition to the next slide, Jeff, we can talk a little bit about how things have perhaps changed. So as I mentioned, a lot has changed in the last 8 to 9 years. IT organizations have evolved, building technology, building skill sets around cloud technologies. The cloud technologies have themselves improved, become more usable, better able to surface the needs that marketers have and that enterprises have to use their customer data. In some cases, you have clients whose integration needs actually kind of surpass the out-of-the-box functionality that many CDPs have. And what we're finding is that, perhaps most importantly, the rules around consent, privacy, data residency that have proliferated globally, these for many organizations have prevented this meaningful investment in trying to comply with those laws, where they focus first on their cloud data warehouses to comply with data residency, consent. And so they're focusing on the data store. And if you think about replicating that in a myriad of connected technologies, you have a multiplicative effect on the amount of effort to achieve compliance with those laws. So given that, more and more brands are starting to think about composable architectures. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today. But we should first talk a little bit about what a composable architecture is. And if we move to the next slide, Jeff. All right. So before we talk about what a composable architecture is, it's perhaps worthy of spending a moment on a packaged CDP. Now, a packaged CDP, and really most marketing technologies, the brand has to get data from its data warehouse or warehouses, send it to a packaged vendor, map it to the data requirements and standards of that software vendor. And this commonly costs brands time and money. Time, because it takes them time to learn the spec, to configure the data feeds, to QA the data feeds, to get them to a reasonable approximation of data that already exists inside of the data warehouse and the source records that data comes from. It costs money because oftentimes it requires external consultancies. It requires software services professionals to do all that work to configure the data in and out of the packaged vendor. Now, there are benefits to the packaged approach. And we'll get into that more as we progress through this content. But generally, that package provider is giving the client some form of event collection. What are their customers actually doing in different channels? Data they may not have in their data warehouse. They're providing ID resolution rules. And oftentimes that vendor has some sort of out-of-the-box ML and some sort of out-of-the-box journey orchestration. So the package provider is offering a lot. They have some reporting around historical audience sizes, insights maybe about who the audiences are that are common. But an unspoken benefit, or one that's perhaps not sold, is what does all that add up to? It adds up to a customer 360 that gets created. And perhaps even sometimes during onboarding, I've seen cases where some sort of anomalous historical data actually gets corrected and kind of fixed and massaged into a shape that a marketing team can use during the onboarding of that package CDP. With Composable, it's a much lighter weight approach. The data already exists inside of the customer data warehouse. You're pushing that work of assembling the customer 360 into the data warehouse for rules like ID resolution. You might think about, how do I collect events and get those to the data warehouse first versus perhaps being filtered by a package CDP. But keeping your data consistent across a myriad of connected technologies is much easier and generally allows for best of breed software choices. We'll talk a little bit about some of the benefits of this, but to tip my hand, this is oftentimes associated to a more rapid time to value and often a lower total cost of ownership.
Yeah, Craig, this is an interesting slide. We get asked a lot and talk to customers a lot about build versus buy. In fact, there's a course on build versus buy versus composability on the CDP Institute that's free if anyone's interested to go check that out. However, the question about build versus buy is one that companies are really thinking about. And, buy is the sort of package CDP idea, right? I'm going to buy a solution that I'm going to deploy that solution, and that's going to be my, what I want. What people have started to talk about is, oh, I don't need that. If I have a data warehouse, I can, build what I need on top of that. And so they're talking about building, but I think that what we want to caution people about is that the right way to think about building is through composable. Right, you're not going to sit down and code from scratch. What you are doing is assembling from best of breed and bringing together solutions. So it's kind of a build, it's like a build and buy, right? You're buying components to bring together into this composable architecture. So it's not so much an either or. There's a lot of good packaged, like the best of breed software choices, capabilities of composability. You want to take advantage of that. You don't want to build this from scratch.
Yeah, 100%. I think as we talk a little bit about, the composable CDP and what that means, there's so much that offers in terms of integration for those data activations that is the same on packaged and composable, but something I don't think any company would reasonably want to buy, rather reasonably want to build, to connect and build all these different data integrations. If a composable CDP provider has 80 plus software integrations, it would be hard to imagine developing all those and maintaining all those. So I do very much think of it as a build and buy, Jeff, and it's a great call out.
Yeah, and one other point on that you were mentioning before around being involved in the deployment of these things 10 years ago, and the creation of the sort of integration of the data into the vendor's model, right? And that was the old model. That was the original Lytics model, right? And while that had a place, it always struck me as somewhat ironic that the solution that came forward to resolve this problem of siloed data is to create another silo of data, right? The master silo of data now, which was the sort of is the some of the package CDPs are still on that. They're still doing that, right? They're still forcing you into their data model, right? So it's duplicative and it's and it's got limitations. I know you're going to talk about more about that, so I'll let you move on here, Craig, and not steal your thunder.
Thanks, Jeff. Now, as we think about it at Actable, there's really kind of three components to our reference architecture when we think about composable. There's the data itself, where we store and oftentimes are actually democratizing that data. There's a decisioning layer around building audiences, reporting, and then there's, of course, a delivery layer where actual campaigns and customer experiences are happening. So it's perhaps worthy of taking, that a click down, Jeff, in the next slide. I'll breeze through the next couple of slides of content just to kind of build this story. So going a level deeper on data, decisioning, delivery, there's a lot of decisions that the brand has to make if they chose to go composable. You'll have to consider what is or what can be solved by your customer data warehouse. For instance, event collection. Do you have all the right data for the use cases that you intend to achieve already in that customer data warehouse, or do you need to think about getting that data into the customer data warehouse? You might think about the role of ML in your audience building. We'll talk about a use case or case study rather with ML a little bit later in this conversation. But what role will ML have in your audience building? Because what level of insights can I extract from that? There's a lot of decisions that Composable forces a brand to think about when they're building their customer experience tech stack. Now, if we bump forward one slide, here's what a package CDP is kind of bringing to you as part of its out-of-the-box solution. These aren't trivial decisions, but the package CDP is oftentimes providing ID resolution, data integration, data collection. They're assembling a customer view, as I mentioned. The CDPs all have audience management capabilities, some level of decision management. And many offer more complex journey management, as Lytics Decision Engine does, as well as advanced ML capabilities on top of that data. Some CDPs go further to even have their own delivery channels, right? Some have email, some have, like Lytics Decision Engine, a site personalization functionality. So really a CDP is actually providing a lot of valuable services that aren't necessarily why a company chose a package CDP, but they're bringing all of these things to the table. With Composable, we're seeing an evolution. And that evolution really is you're making a conscious or unconscious decision to decouple the data from the decisioning and the delivery aspects of that composable architecture. CDPs, and many like Lytics have a package component as well as a composable component. They're adjusting to this paradigm, and they're allowing really rapid time to value on top of the massive amount of valuable data that most clients have about their customers. So their CDPs, like Lytics, are really embracing a modern data stack. I think one thing we react to is Composable CDP is perhaps adding a little bit of confusion to the market, which is what we're trying to do is activate first-party customer data. And whether you're going with packaged or composable, we think your head's kind of in the right place if you're thinking about how do you use your first-party customer data. But this schism of leaving the data components into the data warehouse and treating the CDP as more of an orchestration and decisioning engine on top of that data warehouse are really what we think Composable is all about.
Yeah, that's a great description, Craig, I think. But when you're going down this path, though, right, like there's more you need to think about, because when you buy a package CDP, a lot of that you're asking the vendor to think about all of those things, and you're just deploying the vendor solution. If you're trying to like break it up and think about, what do you need to think about differently with respect to composability here? Let's take these one at a time. Like on the data collection front, what do you see as being different here?
Well, for instance, with many clients I've worked with where they've worked with a package CDP, clients usually have their historical record pretty well configured of who has transacted with them in the past. There's a certain percentage of clients that might have email data downloaded and available inside of their data warehouses, but it's not everyone. And the package CDP has those in and out integrations with email providers where they'll take all the data, for instance, out of Salesforce Marketing Cloud or Adobe Campaign or Iterable or what have you, and actually assemble that into a view that the client may not have had in the past. So there's this data collection and assembly piece that a package CDP performs, that if you're thinking, I want to go composable, you need to be intentional about, do I have all the data I need for my use cases? You probably, the brand, probably already have your customer transactions. You might not have email. Most I've seen actually don't have a great view of their web data or app interactions, right? So a composable, or rather a package CDP oftentimes has event collection for web data that might be well assembled. And of course, we're going to talk a little bit about BigQuery today and Google Analytics, but that is an important piece that oftentimes is not necessarily collected as part of a customer view, in my experience, Jeff.
Yeah, on the collection front, you mentioned that all the CDPs have capabilities for data management. So even in a composable sense, right? Like if you're using Snowflake as your data warehouse, there's still like getting the data in to Snowflake in a usable format that can be used for marketing, right? So profile based, having all the right data there. There are still composable pieces like components, like Lytics Conductor, for example, has a role in collecting and organizing data and getting it into the data warehouse, right? Or organizing it within the data warehouse. So I think it's, just the warehouse is that center of, that's your source of truth. But composability allows you to use the right tools to get the data in and to organize the data and just leverage that the cloud storage layer and a lot of the tooling that gets built around that to enable the connectivity to other tools. So like, Lytics Conductor, it helps, is a piece that we broke out, for example, to help around collecting and assembly. And our decision engine is a different tool that is really around activation and more of the segmentation side of the house. So it's the right tool for the right approach.
That's right. Yeah.
Versus one tool that tries to do it all.
Great call out. Yeah. Then, I think, perhaps thinking a little bit about, activation and use cases. This is an area where whether you're going composable or packaged in this kind of somewhat forced dichotomy, they actually are fairly similar. Each provides a connection to a decision layer. I think an area where it's perhaps different is on the analysis, right? So if many packaged CDPs, including the Lytics decision engine legacy, has a lot of reporting in it. There's insights about audiences, there's historical audience size reporting. There's quite a lot that the user can glean by browsing the UI and all the data that has been assembled there. If you're going composable, it's a great approach, but you want to think very intentionally. Well, how am I going to understand audience size? How am I going to understand how to report on the activations? How am I going to visualize this data? And so there's a lot there to unpack. You also think between activation and analysis, the role of predictive ML. Where does that fit in composable? So those are some of the things where we say composable is great. It is rapid time to value, but there are some things to think about, to be very intentional, ensuring you have the right data, ensuring you have a place for ML and an ability to understand and report upon the activations and audiences.
I think this is too why, if you see there've been some surveys. I think Gartner had one recently that said like the average company has multiple CDPs in place, right? And part of that is because the definition of CDP is somewhat broad. And so if you've got an ID resolution solution and you've got an activation solution and they're different, that might be considered two CDPs, even though they're different tools for different jobs.
That's right.
So composability might mean more tools, more CDPs, but they're operating under one data strategy.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so let's talk about that a bit, because I think, for us at Lytics, we're a Google partner. We're built on Google. We include a BigQuery warehouse as part of our solution. And so, for us and for our customers, they can extend a lot of the capabilities that Lytx can bring to the table through the Google ecosystem. Or you can flip that on its head and think that about Lytx as being a tool that can help you get more value from your cloud data initiatives, particularly when they're Google based. So, one of the things that's changing here is Google Analytics 4 right around the corner. If you're a Google Analytics user, you've been getting all the notifications, and you've probably gone and started that migration, or perhaps you're well down that path, and like it, love it or hate it. And there are definitely some, the people on both sides of that coin. The interesting thing from our perspective is the integration that Google Analytics has with BigQuery. The idea is the same, right? That they have is get the data accessible within the ecosystem of data that the organization is already investing in, and leverage that in an integrated fashion. And that's what Lytx brings to the table as well, right? So we offer, together with Google, a sort of a broad solution across this whole data management, from connection of data through to activation and ROI. And we do it in conjunction with Google and with Google Solutions and with BigQuery as the hub. So we think about BigQuery as a hub of customer data initiatives. Of course, if you're using other data warehouses, as sources, inputs, Google is the Google Cloud is the premier customer data platform, and that's why we're invested so heavily as partners with them. So we think about how connection of data, that you can use Lytx for all of that, to bring that into BigQuery. So you've got a usable profile, you've got the raw events, you can do customer 360 initiatives, sharing that data using Analytics Hub through a clean room solution, extending through Vertex AI to do things like bring your own modeling against the source data, which is hard to do in a packaged CDP solution that's leveraging a vendor's own data model that's hard to get access to. So and we also connect up with a lot of Google oriented partners like LiveRamp, Optimizely, and also Actable, right? Which and your new solution, Predictable. Do you want to say a few words about that?
Yeah. I've mentioned it in the run up to this, which is if you're going composable, you'll want to think about what role do you have in predictive. And for some clients, they have data science teams, and they have assets that they might already live inside of their customer data warehouse. And in the composable approach, if you have that, absolutely, it creates a great way to go and activate that ML in channel. We love Google Cloud at Actable as well. The Vertex AI product enables a lot of great custom builds. We love BigQuery because it's got tools in it like instant BQML, instant BigQuery machine learning, which lets you build custom predictions right on the data that's collected inside of your GA4. But for some clients who want something that's packaged, plug and play, that provides key marketing activations out of the box, we built Predictable on top of a lot of Google Cloud's AI tooling, in order for us to have a way to enrich data inside of a client's customer data warehouse for what we believe are the most common marketing applications: scoring propensity, likelihood of repeat purchase, predicting LTV, product recommendations, churn. What I'll say is, what's important to take away here is that you be using ML, whether that's Vertex, whether that's BQML, or a solution such as Predictable or one of the other composable friendly data science tools out there. Because it's my belief that if you haven't found value from ML, you either haven't used it or you don't have the right people using it. Because what's important about these predictions and how they plug into your composable architecture is that they really work. So Jeff, unless you have anything to add here, I can talk a little bit about a use case where we did just this.
Yeah, go ahead. Let's do that.
Great. Yeah. So this is an example for a financial services client that is a shared client between Lytics and Actable. The client is a retail bank, and they were trying to drive mortgage applications. And this client is very serious about testing. So as such, they put together a really comprehensive test where they took randomly split, fixed cross-channel holdout groups. One, they received their business as usual messaging, and one received an AI-powered messaging that they call intelligent marketing. They integrated all the data into a paid instance of Google Analytics, and they leveraged their Lytics integration to Google Analytics and data that would go into BigQuery for a lot of the reporting. The test was 6 weeks, again, with fixed groups that were randomly split to determine how AI could improve their acquisition efforts. And they did this across media, which included Google Ads, Facebook, site, so some site personalization, and then targeted emails as well. So after that 6-week test, the winner was clear. The AI-driven messaging had actually driven more volume of mortgage applications at a lower CPA, lower in fact by 42%. So it's my case that AI works, and it's a problem that you're going to want to think about and solve for if you go composable.
Yeah, that's a great story. Yeah, AI's I mean, obviously it's all the rage. It's been a huge part of the Lytics approach from the start. And it's interesting because like there was almost a little bit of waning interest in the topic until the generative AI really started to take off. But Lytics has been using AI and Google-powered AI solutions for a long time. For example, every page that your users see on your website, you know, we don't just tell you that they saw the page, we run that page through Vertex AI's natural language processing, and we build a content affinity model for the users based on, and score them on their, you know, affinity to certain types of content based on what they're looking at. And we use AI to build audiences and to predictive scores around that type of thing. So that's all, you know, there's now, I think because of the generative has started to show new use cases, people are interested in some of that. The original things that we were doing a bit more as well, but we're also, as a Google partner, working on a lot of generative AI solutions, like using that to help build queries, essentially be able to query data or build segments using plain language processing, be able to interrogate your data doing the same type of thing. There's a lot of exciting possibilities that we're working on together with Google and with Actable as well. So yeah, was there anything else on that topic, Craig?
No, I can kind of kick off on this slide, Jeff, and just talk for a couple moments about some of the comparisons, right? So I think somewhat this is like there's a false dichotomy between packaged and composable, or rather, perhaps another way of saying that is that there's overlap between these categories. There are providers who can do aspects of composable, perhaps as a way to get started, and then expand into more advanced capabilities. And I'll talk a little bit about our observations as a consultancy. Our purpose at Actable is helping clients accelerate their time to value from first-party customer data. Again, if you're thinking about either of these things, we think that is a good thing, where you're trying to leverage and harness first-party customer data in ways to drive more value and more efficient marketing and more targeted and relevant customer experiences. We have extensive experience in packaged CDP and the rapidly growing composable space. We think BigQuery ought to be that hub for customer data, given what Jeff described as its native tie-ins to Google Analytics, which is an oftentimes an under-leveraged important stream of data around how clients are interacting with your digital properties. But that doesn't mean composable is necessarily right for everyone. So we put together a matrix to kind of compare these things, and you can obviously read it. I'm just going to touch on, I think, what are three of the most important things to call out. Implementation and time to value. Composable is theoretically faster. It's a great way to get started. But you want to make sure that you have your customer data strategy figured out, the ID resolution, your event collection, right? Jeff mentioned Conductor as a way to perhaps help getting started there. The second is use cases. Generally, use cases are limited by the team using the platform. However, there's one important consideration. How often is the data inside of your data warehouse refreshed? For most clients we work with, it's daily. With packaged CDPs, data streams that they can extract may be happening in real time or near real time. So if you're a very highly sophisticated client who needs real-time use cases, you might think about a packaged CDP. It might have some advantages to Composable. For most brands, though, daily data is sufficient for most marketing use cases. And they can get a ton of value by thinking about those Composable as a way to get started. The final point I'll make here is the data science. The packaged CDPs generally provide it. With Composable, you're going to need a different approach. And we've talked a little bit about some of the things to consider there. So those are just 3 things to kind of highlight there. Jeff, anything to add?
Great. Well, I mean, I think it's a good summary. I mean, as I said, if you're interested in learning more on this particular topic, there's a free course on the CDP Institute that I think goes through a lot of the considerations as well, and does a pretty good job of laying out, because nothing is the sort of perfect solution for everybody, right? So, but what we like about the Composable approach is it allows us to meet customers where they are and find ways to build from that, as opposed to having to deploy a new solution to get to the starting line, right? So when in the people have been burned by packaged CDPs that they've found get into endless deployment cycles, or have challenges, I think, like you laid out at the beginning, Craig, like where, oh, now I got a new question, oh, I didn't think about that, now I've got to go through this whole process of trying to rebuild for some of that, and they find that they get stuck in these like implementation bottlenecks, or that they need additional technical resources every step along the way. And with Composable, we think faster, using what you have today, starting small, like finding where you're at and meeting you where you're at, and building from there in a more controlled manner. So, right. So you can, and so you can kind of build over time. That's how we think about it, and why we like it, because, it's not a one size fits all. It's let's figure out where you've got gaps and let's plug those holes and build from there. And I think on that, like one of the approaches that we use with customers, and we're partnering here like with Actable, if anyone on the call here is interested in talking to us about doing a POC, we can do a short-term POC that is really geared at proving out this kind of use case. It's about bringing together limited data sources, but bringing a couple of data sources together, building that BigQuery warehouse, doing some AI, syncing the output to a few destinations, and providing some results. So very, controlled sort of POC, but a quick way to get to value based on leveraging the data that you already have, and the tools that Lytics and Google can bring to the table together with a partner like Actable. So like the idea here is that we can build a really powerful usable profile, and prove that out in a very short period of time here with just a few inputs and outputs, and do that in a way that leverages BigQuery and Vertex AI, so you can see a more robust profile. For many CDPs, if you try to build a profile, if you deploy them and you look at your profile, you might have 20, 30, 40 attributes about the users in your profile. If you do the same thing with Lytics without doing any additional configuration, but just because of the AI that we already leverage and the capabilities that we build into the product by default. You'll have profiles that, you know, have 100+ attributes associated with them. So in a short-term POC, you can start to see some of this come to life here, and really get a taste of this like ability to meet you where you're at and grow, which is what this shows here, right?
Add one
Yeah,
comment
please.
there, yeah.
On this one, or?
Yeah. It's, if you're not using the first party data that you have in BigQuery already, there are opportunities to extract more value from that data, just like the sample case study. So I think you've touched on all the right points, but to tie that specifically to you know, Google Analytics 4, there's a lot of tooling there. We can combine that very easily and sync those audiences over to marketing channels, and not just that, helping to execute and measure those campaigns to kind of prove out what the value was. But you can jump to next and on that one.
Yeah, I mean, this is just illustrative here, but the idea of why we like the being able to meet you where you're at and grow over time is because it aligns with organizational maturity. As you know, wherever you're at today, you're going to mature over time, and you know, you can do that yourself. You can do that with some Lytics support. You can do that with a partner like Actable. We think, you know, with the right tools and with some additional support, you can really, you know, see value grow over time. But it's about getting started, right? It's about starting small and growing from there. So yeah, I mean, you probably use this, you know, you embrace this model every day as a consulting partner. Craig, you got some examples of customers that, you know, that have kind of grown like this, you know, started small and grown over time?
Yeah, absolutely. The example that I provided from the retail bank for us is a great example where some of their initial proving things out initially involved really simple segmentations with one channel, site personalization. And that was inside of the first 4 months, which in the banking space is like really fast because there's so much to work around regulation. And what we saw with them was we found a use case that we executed within the first 4 months of engagement that drove over an 800% lift in applications. And then when they saw that, that's when they started to expand into more ads use cases, email, and actually went and expanded that. So a big part of that is being able to tie these cross-functional teams together, to be able to speak common language between the enterprise data and technology, analytics and marketing operations, and of course, marketing strategy in order to achieve those higher and higher levels of sophistication along the maturity continuum you have here.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so, and anything on the sort of POC front that you want to talk about, Craig? Have you had customers? I mean, if you had a successful POCs, and how do you get to value in such a short period of time? Where do you start?
Yeah, well, I mean, for us, I think you know, a big thing is it's easy to boil the ocean on these sort of exercises. You want to think about, well, what use cases am I trying to achieve? And the other hang up that we commonly see is concerns about data quality or some change that's happening in the data. But on the other hand, I've never actually heard a client say, hey, my data is perfect now, and I can achieve all the use cases I want. It's like the horizon. The data quality, you're always chasing, you never quite get to perfect data quality. So that being said, we're trying to find use cases that are easy to execute with data the client has, technology that oftentimes is in place, and ways to rapidly move and find early wins to build momentum behind the initiative. In the POC that we described, you know, we have an architecture for that. It leverages a lot of Google Analytics, Google BigQuery, Lytics components such as Conductor, and Cloud Connect to be able to reverse ETL into BigQuery. And that, for many clients, is a way to get started really quickly and prove out some wins for someone who needs a proof of concept to perhaps make larger investments and larger customer data programs out after that POC.
Great. Hey, thank you. Hey, we do have a couple questions. There's one question about reverse ETL. We didn't specifically talk about that, but I think you were touching on that around like getting value from existing data warehouses, right? So reverse ETL as a solution, if you're not aware, is allows you to tap into the existing data warehouses that you have and extract that data out for use in your programs. In the case of Lytics, we take that data and activate it back to your profile, so it's a way to leverage the data you already have. But there's a question about the role of reverse ETL and how to think about that within this CDP space. Do you have a point of view on that, Craig?
Yeah, reverse ETL, I think, it's a term that I think has been perhaps fallen out of favor in terms of now people are saying composable CDP. But really what reverse ETL is doing is you're executing a question of the data and kind of in basic terms, a SQL query inside of a technology that's actually connecting to a data set somewhere else. In the case of our POC BigQuery, or whatever the client's cloud data warehouse is, in some scenarios that might differ from that. Now, what I have seen oftentimes where someone went with like a pure reverse ETL approach was we saw that as a skunk works, that someone was trying to achieve some target use case. And it was harder to achieve enterprise adoption beyond that, because when someone thinks about CDP, or they're thinking about some sort of broad scale initiative on their first party customer data, there may be higher level executive attention on that. So while mechanically it is the same, where you're executing a reverse ETL of data that already exists, and I'm asking a question and I'm then pulling that data into the system for a use case. In fact, when it's framed as CDP, there may be higher level of organizational attention and support for that initiative.
Yeah, great. Yeah, there was just last question here. There was a question about costs, and the concern was that you're maybe driving a lot of costs to the cloud solution, right? Like BigQuery associated costs and that. Do you have a take on that versus sort of packaged CDP?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because perhaps the short answer is yes. I mean, it does cost money to run queries in this composable context. First, I'll say many clients, particularly larger clients, may have some sort of spend commitment to the cloud providers that they need to fulfill. And this is a great way to drive value against that spend commitment. You're using it for campaigns that would drive revenue rather than just pure analytics, where it's a step removed. The value of analytics is more indirect, and the decisions you make from things that you learn, whereas this is activating data directly. What I'll say is, while it does drive cost on a cloud provider, it may in fact be a total a cost that is lower than the total cost of ownership of having to extract that data and then send it and replicate it into another marketing technology vendor, where that vendor now has costs that are passed on. So while it does drive cost in the cloud, I would say that you might consider the total cost of ownership, particularly where we're getting started with those non-real-time use cases.
Great. Yeah, thank you for that. Hey, we had another question come in through the Q&A, so that wasn't the last question. We got one more here. Apart from data collection systems such as Salesforce, what other software platforms need to be considered as part of this data architecture? Data warehouse, API connector, etc. Which data warehouse and API work best with Actable's solution?
Yeah. Jeff, I don't know where we netted out. Did we put the reference architecture slide after this one?
It is in here. Let me get back there. Hang on.
Thanks for the question, Brian. So when we think about this, so if you're going full scale composable, you might think about any number of data transfer solutions that might include like Fivetrans or funnels and things like that might actually help with some of the event collection. But when we're thinking about POC, we're thinking a lot about Google Cloud in this case, and BigQuery data transfer service and Conductor are great ways to get data. We just put illustrative examples like Braze as a ESP is one that we commonly encounter. Iterable is another one we commonly encounter. But there's dozens upon dozens of ESPs out there. And then you have records of sales and perhaps some sort of other transactions that might live inside of a data warehouse already, or it might live inside of a Salesforce or something like that. Then we just think about batching that data into BigQuery, using Conductor to integrate and create rules around identity resolution, and then using Cloud Connect to kind of go and activate on that. If a client sometimes will have a data visualization provider already kind of on top of their data warehouse, but we like Looker Data Studio as a way to get started on data visualization. And then when we think about this, when we named Actable, we thought about, well, what actions are we going to take from all the data? And we're always thinking about the actual marketing campaign. How are we delivering the audience into a channel? So we always think that the highest value, easiest to execute use cases early on in a POC are ads. So we're sending that to Google Ads, DV360, all associated Google channels, and of course, for many clients, it's Facebook, it's TikTok, it might be Amazon, depending on your vertical. All of those would have connectors for Cloud Connect for us to get started. Great.
Hey, Craig, thank you so much for being with us today, for sharing such great knowledge. If anyone has any additional questions, I think we're going to send out a copy of the recording to you. So feel free to reply and ask us any follow-up questions if you have any. Appreciate everybody joining us today. Thank you, Craig. And hope everybody has a good rest of your week.
Thanks, Jeff.
Bye.
Thanks all. Bye now.